Welcome to the deep dive. So, you're maybe thinking about the 2025 Chevy Blazer.
It's definitely getting some attention.
Yeah, so we've sifted through the reviews, the reports, all that stuff. We're going to give you the essentials, the good, the bad, the highlights.
Exactly. No need to read a dozen articles. We'll cut straight to what you need to know if this SUV is, well, on your list.
Okay, let's dive in. First up, the look. Reviewers seem to really like the front end. They're using words like sporty, elegant.
Definitely noticing that, too. They talk about sharp lines, the grille being pretty eye-catching.
And those modern LED headlights.
Yeah.
It all adds up to what they call a bold and dynamic appearance. Seems like Chevy put some real effort into the styling this time.
It does suggest maybe they're aiming for a slightly different buyer, perhaps someone a bit more focused on, aesthetics.
Could be. Now, under the hood, you basically get two options, right?
That's right. There's the 2.0-liter turbo, puts out around 228 horsepower.
Which they say is good for, like, daily and economical driving.
Pretty much your standard commuter engine. Then there's the bigger one, the 3.6-liter V6.
Yeah, that one's got about 308 horsepower. So that's for strong performance, impressive acceleration, more grunt, basically.
Right, so it's that classic choice. Save a bit on gas with the turbo, or get more power with the V6. Depends on what you're after, really.
Makes sense. Okay, safety. This seems to be a strong point.
Yeah, the reports mention a whole suite of advanced safety and security systems.
Like forward collision warning, automatic emergency braking, the usual suspects.
And lane keeping assist, blind spot monitoring. Plus, it seems to have done well in crash tests, getting high ratings.
So safety seems pretty well covered. That's reassuring.
Definitely. For families or just, anyone driving every day, that's a big tick in the box.
All right, let's move inside. Tech and comfort. What are we looking at?
Okay, so there's a modern infotainment system. Comes with an 8-inch high-definition touchscreen.
Which is pretty standard these days. And a digital instrument panel, too.
Yep, and critically, support for Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. That's almost a must-have now.
Totally. And you can get an optional Bose sound system if you're into your music.
Right. Comfort-wise, they mention luxurious materials. Things like leather seats are available.
Plus, dual-zone climate control.
Yep.
And what about space? Storage?
Decent, ample storage space, apparently.
Mm.
And it expands if you fold the rear seats down up to about 64 cubic feet. So practical enough on paper.
Good, good.
Yeah.
And handling different roads?
Well, you can get it with either front or all-wheel drive.
Okay, so options there.
Yeah, and it has what they call a balanced suspension system, supposed to give good stability on regular roads and even some rougher ones. Having the all-wheel drive option definitely makes it more versatile.
Right, good for different climates or maybe light trails?
Exactly. It broadens the appeal. Some people want the extra grip. Others might stick with front-wheel drive for maybe slightly better fuel economy.
Okay, so that's the good stuff. But it's not all perfect, right? There are some criticisms.
No vehicle is. And yeah, there are a few recurring points in the reviews. One is about the interior finish.
Ah, right. Some reviewers felt the materials used in the cabin don't quite match some of the competition.
Exactly. They point out noticeable amounts of plastic, which, can kind of take away from that sense of luxury they might be aiming for elsewhere.
So maybe a bit of a trade-off there. Looks versus feel inside.
It could be. In this market segment, interior quality, that perceived value, it really matters. People compare.
And that balanced suspension. You mentioned stability, but what about comfort?
Well, that's another point. Some find it tends to be stiff on rough roads.
Ooh, okay. So maybe not the smoothest ride if you hit a lot of potholes.
Potentially, yeah. Could lead to a less comfortable ride, especially on bumpy surfaces. Something to think about depending on where you typically drive.
Ride comfort is definitely important. What else? Space.
Yeah, there are comments that the storage space and rear seating are limited compared to some other mid-size SUVs.
So maybe mid-size, but leaning towards the smaller end of that category.
It could feel that way, especially if you often have adults in the back or need to haul a lot of gear. Might feel a bit tight.
Okay. And engine-wise, anything on the downside?
Well, a big one for some people is the lack of a hybrid option.
Yeah. That's becoming more common elsewhere.
Right, and reviewers see it as a drawback for environmentally conscious buyers, especially with the global push to reduce emissions.
And tied to that, I guess, is fuel consumption.
Exactly. The report suggests its fuel consumption rate isn't as less efficient compared to some competitors. So no hybrid and maybe thirstier than rivals.
That could be a deal breaker for some.
It definitely could, especially with gas prices being what they are.
Anything else? We mentioned rear seating space.
Just that some specifically say the rear seats may not provide enough comfort for adults, especially on long trips. So maybe okay for kids, but less so for adults back there for hours.
Right. And one last practical point.
Yes. Just a note that depending on where you are, the availability of the vehicle and maintenance services may be limited compared to maybe more established local competitors. Something to check in your specific area.
Okay, good point. So let's wrap this up. The 2025 Chevy Blazer. It looks sharp, offers engine choices from economical to powerful, and seems strong on safety.
But on the other hand, you've got potential concerns about the interior materials feeling a bit plasticky, the ride being possibly stiff, maybe less space than some rivals.
And notably, no hybrid option, which impacts fuel efficiency compared to some competitors. Plus, maybe check rear seat comfort for adults and local dealer support.
It really comes down to weighing those pros and cons against what you personally need and want in an SUV.
Exactly. Which brings us to our final thought for you. Looking at the Blazer, with its sporty vibe but also these practical limitations, what compromises are you willing to make or not make in a midsize SUV? What matters most?
Something to ponder.
That's your deep dive. Thanks for tuning in.